reason to use that. So it ended up becoming very like dirty, and the drawing is going from one side to the other side. It's not maintaining properly, and it just became a task. So like I was drawing, and then Angel came and she was like, "How are you getting this? Why am I not getting it?" And like, forget using stumps. Okay, I was able to do it because before I went to LA, I did 1 year of training at Florence. Okay, in Florence we do not use that much like brushes and stuff. Advanced students though used it. Okay, advanced students would use brushes and things like that. But in the beginning, it was advisable that you would try to work without stumps and brushes. And I did not realize the importance of it at that time when they were telling me. Later on, when I saw my friends struggling with it, I was like, okay, that's probably a good idea just to work with. Yeah. Okay, so because it developed that muscle memory, and it developed that how pressure works, how I can get a clean value just with graphite. And then later on I started introducing stumps in that Russian academic drawings which I was showing you. In that also then we use a lot of hatching. So it's not just stumping. On top of it again you hatch. So to hatch again you need to develop the control of using the pressure properly, like how to get your strokes. Sometimes when you put a stroke, how can you go from light to dark in one manner. So for that also you have to develop your skill. So that 1 year of training at Florence kind of helped a lot. A lot of the times I see like students say, okay, I have to spend 60 hours on a drawing, 100 hours on a drawing. Okay, it just builds your patience, and you can of course achieve the same things quicker. It's not that it's not possible to do it quicker, but the level of finish will be different. If you see the level of finish in a 20-hour drawing versus a drawing which maybe took 60 to 80 hours to do, the level of finish will be much.
Slow is fast. Slow is fast.
Again, it also matters the aesthetic. What kind of aesthetic do you like in the drawing? Like, right? So based on that, you can experiment with the tools and see how it works. But when you're using stump or when we're using brush as a tool, it has a specific purpose to it. It's not just doing it randomly, right? So stump, if I'm using on the surface of the paper, sometimes I'll dip it in graphite or things like that, and then I'll kind of work on the surface of the paper to kind of get like a half tone. Okay, or when I'm working with wine charcoal and general charcoal pencil, because wine charcoal will get very dark very fast, right? So what I can do is basically when I'm working with wine charcoal, if I'm drawing something, right, I can fill in the shape very dark, but I know that my shadows are not going to be that dark. So what I can do is I can use a brush and then I have to dust it off. So tiny bit of it will be in the paper and tiny bit will come up. And it will give me a nice base and a half tone value onto which then I can use my generals, charcoal pencils to kind of work it. With some of the charcoals, if you keep them for too long, they're going to not work. Right? So on this again you hatch and you kind of design the edges, things like that. Or you use an eraser to kind of remove. Sometimes you use a stump if you want to remove more of that charcoal. Okay. So there is a specific purpose of using these tools when you are doing mixed media drawings, and it works in a certain way. But the idea of clean values, whether what is the light effect, how to organize value, how to design the shapes, it will still remain the same. Okay, it's just your tools are change it. That's it. Okay. So that is the basic idea of how. And even in Todorvich's class, when we were using all these materials, like some of the students were struggling a lot more. Okay, because they did not really understand. He's just doing his demo and he's sitting there and he's like, I'll use a brush, I'll use a stump, then it's a nice beautiful drawing. But the trial and error, no, what he gained from using that material again and again and again, consistently, is he understood what was happening. Okay, so in the beginning, it's not about like exploring as many materials as possible. It's about sticking with one particular thing till you learn all the concepts. So that consistency is important. If every time I'm using a different material, I have to know how it behaves. Okay. And once that consistency, once you get to a certain point, then you can experiment as much as you want. Okay. So that is the idea of charcoal, stumps, brushes, why we use it, how we use it. So when we're using a brush as well, we're just pulling the value from darks into the light, right? Or sometimes when we use a brush to soften it or to kind of remove the charcoal from the paper. So in this also I'm using a brush generally when I'm working, but I use a brush, for example, if I'm designing this shape and I don't like it and I want to kind of rework on it, so I'll use a brush to kind of remove that shape instead of an eraser.
But that brush is kind of hard, no?
Yeah, it's a bit hard.
Won't it cause the paper to get marks?
This is
No,
300.
not this in general.
I can also use a sandpaper. Here you can see I've used sandpaper. You can use a sandpaper on arches. That's because this paper is pasted on a fan. So on the rough paper, I just used to use sandpaper and just kind of sand it down just to get rid of the texture.
What is the adhesive you use for that?
Huh?
What is the adhesive you use for sticking it?
I'll get to. I'll show how to paste the paper as well. So why am I using a brush? Is because I don't like the shape, I don't like the value, and I don't like what is happening with it, or if I want to just soften it and remove it and destroy it. Those are the reasons why I'm using a brush. It is not just I have a brush in my hand. Okay, or the other reason is to unify. Okay? If I'm getting so many strokes and all, then I can use a brush tiny bit easily just to kind of unify the value. But when I use the brush, I also have to be aware that it will get smoky and it will remove some of the value. So then again, I will probably have to remove. Okay, so there are different reasons why we use these materials. And for this also, you have to build up a bit of proficiency in understanding what is value, what is shape, what is dirty lights, what is clean lights. Otherwise, if you don't control these mediums well, you can end up much more easily going dirty than just if you use charcoal by itself without the use of stumps. Okay. So that's the reason why we suggest in the beginning also just to only use graphite and charcoal by itself and see what happens. And then later on, like what I do now, use whatever you want. Okay, Shantanu has created mixed media cast drawings. Once we, like, for me, it's not like we're trying to bind you or this thing. No, it's just okay. You reach a level of understanding, then you're free to do whatever you want. Explore, have fun. But tiny bit, at least some understanding if you get to, then it's easier. You won't find it that much challenging. So there is no restriction in that sense. Basically, it's just trying to gain the proficiency and you're much more free to do. And generally, like whenever we're trying different mediums or different things, so this is just all experimentation only for this drawing. Okay, so here I have started using different tools because, like I said, no, what is the concept behind this drawing? Is basically it's inspired by a Waterhouse painting of Ophelia, where she's floating in the water. But in that painting, there's a lot of greenery and there's a lot of these things happening. But I want to do a contemporary version of that painting. The other interesting thing is, do you see how the tone of the paper is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's very.
Bluish, greenish, turquoise, no? Like water kind of
And it
effect.
doesn't look even.
Because of the water.
Okay, because it's toned with watercolor and ink, basically. No, I've used
You toned it twice, right? Initially it was
lighter and then again I did a bit of drawing and then I toned on top. Basically.
very good at paint on that.
So I'm going to do some, like in these areas I'm thinking I'll paint with acrylic or wash. Over there I'm going to use Russian sauce and like I've experimented with these various things, no, because I want to get a very dark value and a dark value which kind of represents the idea of pollution. Okay, and that's the idea, no? So I'm experimenting and to see like what can create a very like rich, dark, flat, black value to represent that idea, no? So I tried various things where I used like this is like pan pastel, so that gives me like a nice smoky value. So I might use this in some lighter tones to work with to create that like effect.
And what company is that?
This is pan pastel. Pan pastel. In this you'll also get different shades. This is black, right? PBK7. So like this, in this you'll get Romber, you'll get sienna, you'll get like
Is that like a powder?
it's like a powder. You can just take this
Use a brush or something? Or?
pan pastel. You can put it with stump or a brush.
Okay.
You can just kind of take tiny bit and kind of apply it. It's like a makeup thing.
Yeah, basically.
Or you can use a sponge, like a flat sponge or things like that. You can dip it in, apply with
Makeup
the sponge.
sponge.
But the thing with this pan pastel is it's actually quite nice because if you even kind of rub it, it doesn't really come out. Okay, it retains the.
What is it made of?
It's probably just pigment. Most of the things are just made with pigments and things, no? And it's written not for cosmetic use.
It's quite expensive, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's very nice because you apply it and you kind of can go over it many times and it still retains the value. If you just spread a bit more and it will become more softer if you do that. No? So I like that effect a lot. Then I use just pan pastel with a brush. That's the idea. This is basically pan pastel plus like this is done with a sponge brush. So what tools am I using? I'm using a sponge. Am I just using a normal brush to apply it? How does that affect? No? This is like chunky charcoal, which is so Creta color comes with this charcoal called chunky charcoal. It's just like this wide piece of stick like this, but it's like compressed charcoal in a sense. No? So with that, I was able to get very dark black value.
That is water soluble also, right?
That's water soluble as well. But I tried here, so it's pastel plus a sponge brush plus water plus chunky charcoal. So that is what I was able to get. No? Here, this is just chunky charcoal in water, but you can see it's not as dark. I tried to apply it multiple layers also, and it did not get that dark. Then what I did was first I applied a wet water application. So this is just wet water application and then dry charcoal powder, which is this on top. So I got that kind of toner. This is basically wet water application and then add dry chunky charcoal powder with a brush. So like that various, what if I do this, what kind of, and even in this you can see how you have a wide range of things coming out. No? Some are more darker, some are less darker, and some your range is
So
more.
when you're saying water, you first apply it and then wait for it to
Wait, no, just apply it, wet the paper, and then on top draw into the wet paper.
Oh.
Or use a brush and then this. And you can also, so some of these things basically soluble. So I use a cup or this thing, I pour water, I take the powder and I dissolve it. And then apply.
So then erasing won't work, right?
It will work.
It'll work?
I'll show you how to do it.
So even in this painting, you said you've done
That is
watercolor.
not erasable.
So
Because that
once,
is ink.
okay,
and
but if it's
watercolor.
watercolor, once you use watercolor, you can.
You can't erase. With charcoal is dry.
No, once you use watercolor and then charcoal on top, then you can't erase charcoal.
You can erase charcoal. Why can't you erase charcoal? Charcoal is erasable. Some charcoals you can't erase.
No, she says that if you dissolve with the water.
I'm saying like once you, for this you said you've used,
Watercolor.
yeah, if it was not ink and if it was watercolor and then you've sketched and you want to erase it, you can erase charcoal.
Yes.
And the ink, watercolor won't come out in these white patches.
So in this setting I use watercolor and ink because watercolor will also stay. Because once it dries it doesn't come on. It's still archival.
Camel nicola.
Huh?
Camel nicola.
If
Yeah.
you're using good.
No, that's why I asked actually.
That's what
Because
it is.
that's like, because sometimes when you want to get the watercolor out, not every time you use blade, sometimes sit and erase it actually comes out.
Because
Depends
it's a
on
low
pigment.
grade.
Paper
Yeah,
also.
it's a low
Pigment,
grade.
paper, many things.
That's why I wanted to know.
So I use watercolor and
So for arches and all, it will stay, is it after?
I think I used also in this. This is an acrylic ink.
Yeah.
So
The liquid text?
Liquid text, acrylic inks. So those will not
Mm.
come out at all.
Mijoro also doesn't work.
Watercolor if you have to
Mijoro
lift,
doesn't
you can
come.
lift it.
That's
Right,
watercolor.
Watercolor you can't
हाँ,
mostly erase it
उसका
because
वो
of
भी
the
अच्छा
air
है।
and the grain.
That's what I wanted
But
to
you
know.
can lift it. You
Yeah,
can
that's
take
what I
the
wanted to
damp
know.
If
If
it's
you
wet
sketch-
into wet, you can lift it. When you're working wet into the watercolor,
Mm.
but after a few days, if you try to remove it, it will be like you have to use a
Slightly
blade.
difficult, हाँ. But हो जाता है. It's not 100% gone, but you can make a piece of it.
Okay.
So like this, you can experiment with different, and by varying the application of how you mix things, you'll get different effects. Basically, that's the idea. But for this, you have to just experiment. Okay. So like that, you can kind of experiment. Okay, how dark, how light. The other thing also, like why I used a cooler surface. One is because of the concept. And then if you see one of my drawings, which is outside, right, the one with the arms folded just at the
Yeah.
entrance on the right,
The big one.
the big one. That I used a tone of cool because I just wanted to use it.
It looks like a dry paste.
Tone of?
Like cool tone,
Cool
like
tone.
purple and blue, warm and this I started.
Blue, no?
I'll show you the process of that as well. But I just started using that. Before that, I used a very warm surface, like a ochreish surface. Because all the old master drawings, when you see, they're on this like very nice warm tone surface, which is kind of like this, right? But in that, I kind of just toned it more with cool surface. Because why every time warm?
Yeah.
Because why? Why every time work on the warm? Why not on a cool surface?
But usually when you have to buy these charcoal books, everything has a tone things like
What was the
By
experience?
using cool colors, what was the emotion it was?
Yeah, and
It was much more somber
Okay.
and sad and like that. No? And in fact, with that piece, like I got a comment like once I finished it, like a couple of people came and like, Every time I look at it, I want to cry. And that is actually for me very rewarding that someone actually felt. Yeah, because it kind of got emotional
So
response.
the last supper can be done in that color.
Huh?
The last supper can be done in those colors.
Maybe. We have to try now. So I was just like, why not cool colors? Why every time use of warm colors? No, just for the sake of experiment. Okay, I started with a cool color, just like I'll do a nice portrait drawing on a cool tone paper. That was the idea where it began with. And then as slowly as I started drawing, I realized, okay, maybe I can push something more in the drawing. So sometimes I just start drawings or paintings because I like it. There's no other story, there's no reason, there's no idea behind it. Okay, but sometimes I have an idea, like I was showing you my sketchbook in the morning. I have an idea, I sketch it out, I think about it, I think about the composition. Sometimes I just like the image, I want to paint it, or I like the portrait of someone. I like their characters, I just want to draw it. But in that process, maybe sometimes an idea will also come from. Okay? If you do it with passion. If you don't do it with passion, and if you're like, why do I want to do one of those? Then probably you won't push that level. So that drawing just came out just from my whim, you can say, of like why use warm paper, why not a cool paper. But I learned something. And then after that I did one more drawing on a cool surface paper, which is that small drawing. And then the idea fit very well into the theme that I was trying to depict. So it's kind of working a lot. And in those also somehow the ideas kind of fit with the cool surface. Because one is called Saudade, which is like a feeling of longing and waiting for someone or something to happen. So in that also the cool tones kind of reflected that somber feeling. The other one is the bleak sunset. So in that also it's a bit more. And this is more climate change, so it kind of works. Okay, so like that you can also tone the surface in different ways and create your surfaces in different ways depending on the idea. Sometimes you don't have an idea just for the sake of trying to try. Okay. So we've covered pencils, charcoals, erasers. Kneaded eraser is just go-to because it's much more softer. But when I don't want to use kneaded eraser, I can also use a brush to remove charcoal. I've used hair dryers to remove charcoal because I just didn't want the I just didn't want the surface of the eraser to go on the paper, so that I can experiment with it much longer. Okay, so I would like in drawings or in student drawings, I've done this multiple times. I would just go ahead, or I'll tap the board on the ground if there's excess charcoal. There are various ways you can remove nitrum and mancha without damaging the surface of the paper a lot. So I've used hair dryers for these things, but generally arches paper will take a lot, especially if it's pasted on a razors, this mechanical pencils are there. They come in different types. You can get like a one which has a 2 mm lead holder, so it behaves almost like a wooden pencil, right? Or something that is a bit more, just like you get 0.5, 0.3, 0.7 leads. 0.3 is made maybe for more detail oriented, and in 0.3 only you get to a certain hardness, the lead, right? 0.5 again slightly less, and then 0.7 for more softer. So like that you'll also be
So
able
while
to
buying mechanical pencils in general, like artists, most artists have seen use the heavy one, but it's harder to sketch in a heavy one.
I don't
Why
know.
do they, Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah. This is very light.
Very light.
So,
So I actually don't like the heavy ones. I like the
light
light
ones.
ones. So I actually go to a store
But
and
in
then search for.
general, they ask. I mean, I've seen all these artists use this heavy metal body.
This is a heavy one.
I
Okay.
bought one
That's
like that.
trigger.
It was so annoying to sketch with it.
Again, heavy ones they have their purpose.
Trigger is okay.
So when you're
It's
doing
not very plastic.
when you're doing quick sketching,
Mm.
if you want to get a darker value very quickly, the heavy ones help in that.
I have one.
So when you're hatching and if you put like a 4B or 6B lead in it, and if you're hatching and if you have a heavier pencil, the body, you get the darker marks in one go.
Mm.
So in quick sketching.
Okay.
Okay, but if you build it up slowly, then you want light one.
अगर ऐसे होल्ड करने में उसमें प्रॉब्लम है, ऐसे होल्ड करने में प्रॉब्लम है, हैवी वाले में मेरे को तो आई का
Okay, so that is the idea, no? So that's why like some artists might prefer the heavy ones. Okay, it has a specific purpose, right? Maybe they know, maybe they don't know. I'm not sure. But most of the time, that's the reasoning. I would probably use a heavier one. Okay, so it's like knowing your tools, what you're working with, how it's behaving, how it's kind of working. No? Like with interim charcoal, also I know like okay, this piece is too hard. No, so I'll take another one. Sometimes I'll rotate it. Even during rotation, it will change. So like that's how conscious I know about my tools. After a certain point, it becomes again subconscious. Then you're not even thinking about it, and you're just drawing and it will happen. So most of the artists maybe don't put so much thought into it when they're working. It's more experience. Because of experience, they have the idea. Okay, this works in this manner. Sometimes I know artists will say like, I know like sometimes beginners come in and ask me a question: why use a 2B? What kind of pencil are you using? So I know the reason why I'm using something, so I try to answer in that manner as well. Because again, drawing came very hard to me, so I had to learn everything consciously. If drawing would have come easy to me, maybe I would not have paid so much attention to what something is doing. Okay, and I would just do it and then it would probably happen. Okay, so papers, pencils. These are just some experiments again of papers toned in different. So when I was doing that experiment, so one drawing which I did was basically on this kind of a warmer tone. Like this kind of a tone I used for the paper. So these experiments kind of helped me like before starting toning like a bigger piece of sheet. And then for the one that is outside, I started with a tone like this in the beginning. So I would just write down what is the mixture, what ink I'm using, violet plus speed brown. And then I'll sometimes also make notes, okay, first one layer of violet, let it dry, then on top another layer of brown, and then it kind of gives that effect. No? So like that I would just experiment and see, okay, what effects that I'm getting. If I'm using maybe deep red and ultramarine, I got something much more vibrant versus just using that violet ink with water. And the ratio of water to ink, basically how much.
Have you shown it in my?
Right, I'll show you now. Right, so that is the idea. So I would just do these experiments and then it becomes an idea, okay, what kind of tone would I use for what project. So with the charcoal we're done, and sometimes you just take the pure, so these are just like swatches of just pure ink, and just spread the pure ink to understand what is its color and what is its how strong is it or how weak is it. No?
What is the difference between acrylic ink and
water soluble ink. That is just water soluble ink. Both are the same. Acrylic ink is more permanent.
Brighter, permanent as in
Stays longer.
Okay.
Acrylic ink. Whereas the other one can fade with time. But again, that one will also take probably a lot of time for it to fade, especially if you use good inks like Winsor Newton Professional.
Is different from photo or is it the same?
I think it should be different.
It's mostly the same, but this
Doing,
is photo color ink is more thinner, like.
I hope it Right.
No, photo ink is already very thin. Photo color ink is already very thin.
But inks like I think photo inks are not water soluble.
viscosity is ज़्यादा है.
They're really permanent.
Okay,
It's really
Yeah,
permanent. It's like
it's-
normal ink, but it's really permanent.
I never tried it.
No, the
And
viscosity is
that is vibrant. So
Okay.
it is.
But it's very thin, but it has a very bright
Right.
color.
That is very.
So these are not so bright. You can see.
Yeah.
Like someone like the turquoise one is kind of bright. But these are more water soluble and they're more permanent, so you can use them. And with the other inks, what will happen is sometimes the other inks kind of split more. Okay, whereas this ink I've tried it and it doesn't split as much as the other ink. So sometimes that can be a difference as well. How much when you dissolve it with water, how does it split? Right. So like the ones I was using before, which was just Winsor Newton inks, this was splitting a lot. So that did not go on the surface quite that evenly.
Yeah, after the ink usually doesn't stick that much.
Right. This is like Sennelier ink. This is like a walnut stain, and it's a shellac based ink. Okay, so in this already there is a tiny bit of shellac in it.
What
So
exactly does that do?
it will alter the truth of the paper.
No, the
Basically.
ink, when you said some of that is there in the ink also,
It
right?
will alter the tooth, the surface of the paper. It will make it slightly rougher.
So rougher.
How does it do that?
Hmm?
What is it? How is it doing this?
Because it is a resin compound.
Okay.
So,
So it's like altering.
it's altering the surface basically.
I don't know if it was
On a like very micro level, but tiny bit.
That
of tooth.
won't do anything to the brushes. That won't harm the brushes or anything. Because usually resin, like in general when you use resin, it's
Because it's in very minute
okay.
quantities. You know? If it's a larger quantity, then the brushes will become very stiff, and you have to kind of wash it as soon as you use it. Okay, then you can use the brush. But once it's only for toning. On top, once it's dry, it's permanent, basically. So this is probably more permanent than the water soluble ink, right? Because it has a resin, it's like a varnish. It's like a layer basically, which is sealing the surface a bit more, but it's also altering this. Even just when we take a normal watercolor paper and when we just apply water, also we are kind of altering the surface on a very micro level. It will become slightly rougher because the pores of the paper are going to start opening up when we use water, not just with water also. When we're using it's more. If you want to alter the surface more, then shellac based ink, you can make your own shellac. Okay, and in the shellac you can also mix your you get pigment powders. So you can mix pigment powder and in different ratios get different tones and work with that to create different surfaces.
So also ink में ना एक certain vibrancy I'm noticing. Even the browns have this certain vibrancy. Ink वाले tone में. ये मैंने ना सिर्फ watercolor से tone किया है. I'm seeing for the first time.
These are
Difference. तो इसमें even brown में एक certain kind of vibrancy है. Dull में भी. वो watercolor में ना काफी subtle होता है.
Again, it's also ratio, water to ink ratio.
Plus also the binding agent.
That's what I think. It's more dull. This is more vibrant, fresh.
This is gum therapy.
हाँ,
In
the
watercolor.
vibrant nature of watercolor makes it tough.
Done.
So that's why you choose a better brand so that उनका जो भी pigment का quality that is having is non-aramid will read it.
But it looks ऐसा नहीं
हाँ,
it
ये
was
अच्छा
like
है।
you it had मेरे को अच्छा लगता है मतलब
So again, do you want it desaturated? Do you want it saturated?
depends कि कौन सा काम होता है
In watercolors, you can get it very vibrant,
हाँ
right? Depending on how much water you're mixing, how you apply it. In that sense, also you can make it very vibrant. It just depends. So in that piece, I use watercolor on top to get that vibrancy. Because when I wrote it with ink, well, it looked for me very desaturated. It was something like this. And then I used ink one layer again. Then I used watercolor. Then I used ink again.
to get the right
But not all watercolors are also that chalky. Like Vincent Newton, Daniel Smith, and all is really good quality.
It's like oil paints. If you use camel, if you use
Watercolor
Hold
you can
on.
also use there's a brand called Vanago. Vanago के जितने
मैं मुझे भी
brushes
उसमें
होते हैं।
भी it's different
हाँ,
I feel this is ink में थोड़ा white ये अलग टाइप की वैरायटी है
this is
Thermocrate type
What you suggest about
ink
yourself?
की वजह से